Hello everyone, Dave Simpson here, Flight Training Apps. Today we're going to talk about hold, something that many people struggle with. I find my instrument students will have passed the knowledge test and have answered the questions correctly. However, they still struggle with actually doing it in the airplane. And one of the reasons for this is that when the questions are presented on the knowledge test, you'll find that we have an airplane here flying towards a fix, and they'll ask you what type of hold it is. Well, that's not the way we fly. The way we fly is heads up in the airplane towards a fix, and everything is in front of us, and we're going to be looking at a presentation of an HSI, or it might be a VOR, and it's going to look like this with a centered needle, and we need to use our HSI or OBS to figure out what type of hold it is. So we'll just start over here as if this is how we're actually going to fly this in the airplane. So we have a VOR here, and we have our airplane here, proceeding towards the fix. And we'll make it easy for math purposes here. We'll just assume, and I'm going to use an HSI presentation because when we fly this later in our SR-22T, we have a HSI. So this is the way it would look to us in the airplane. And let's just start with the first type of hold, which is, let's say we're holding on the 300 radial. And we'll assume here, I'm going to use right turns. We'll talk about how we do left turns in a minute, but right turns. So the key to this really is to try to visualize the hold on the HSI or VOR. And in this case, what we can do is we would visualize, there's our VOR, here's our airplane down here, and we are flying towards the VOR. Now, if we look at where would the hold radial be, the hold radial will be right there, 300. Now, this is an easy way to use your hand to help visualize the different types of holds. So if I was to put my index finger on the centered needle, and I would use my index finger right here, I got my third finger over here, and I got my thumb over here. And as you can see, I'm approximating here about a 70-degree angle. And if I drew the line straight through, this approximates a 110-degree angle. And then we have the rest, which is the remaining 180 degrees down there. So by doing this, we can pretty much approximate a 70-degree sector, a 110-degree sector, and a 180-degree sector. So this is 180 down here, 70 here, and 110 here. What you remember is that the 70-degree sector is teardrop. If the hold radial exists here, then it's a teardrop entry. If the hold radial exists from here to 110 degrees, as it does in this case, it's a parallel entry. And if the hold radial is somewhere between here around to here, then it's a direct. So in this case, we have a parallel entry. Later, we're going to talk about how to actually fly the parallel entry. And similarly, if our hold radial was here, let's say 060, and we were asked to hold on the 060 radial, we would know that that's a teardrop entry. And finally, and we'll start with the parallel entry. So we want to visualize it this way. Here's our fix or VOR. Here's our airplane down here. And this is what we would be looking at here on our HSI. And again, for simplicity's sake, we'll just use flying towards the VOR with a centered needle on the 360 course. So let's just say, as we did in the first example, that our hold radial right turns is a 300. Hold on the 300 radial. So again, we can visualize that, and this is really the key to all this, is that we can visualize that 300 radial right there. And it looks very similar to the picture as we're flying heads up. So here's where we're going to use a sort of a sequence, a memory technique called the 5 T's. And the 5 T's will be to turn, then twist, then time, then throttle, and finally talk. So let's kind of go through these in order, and we'll see how this actually works in real life. So as we approach our fix or VOR, we're going to see that we have an ambiguity indicator here, which will flip depending on whether we're using an HSI or a VOR. We're going to have a flip from a to to a from, and we'll have a from indication here. So when we pass the VOR, we're going to start our 5T sequence. So the first one of these will be to turn to a heading that approximates the 300 outbound. So it's going to look like this, and we'll be slightly on the non-holding side because of the time that it takes us to recognize that we've passed the VOR and we get a from, and we're now going outbound. So we simply turn to 300. We also have to make some adjustment for the wind. If we have a GPS in the airplane, we can fly that airplane so that our track is 300. And if we don't, we're going to have to make our best guess as to how do we fly a course basically of 300. So this is the outbound section. So we've turned. Now, as soon as we pass this, we're going to twist the OBS or the HSI to the inbound course, which will be the reciprocal of the hold radial. In this case, the reciprocal of the hold radial will be 120. So this will become, on the twist, 120. We'll proceed outbound. At the point that we twist, this ambiguity indicator here will turn to a 2, which is a useful thing to think about as a memory aid, that we will always time the 2 indications. So as we twist, we will start our time as we go to the outbound. And we can visualize what's happening as well on our HSI as we think about the airplane down here coming in towards the VOR, and now we're on the outbound. We're timing for a 1-minute inbound, so we have to guesstimate initially what our inbound time is going to be. In a no-wind situation, it's going to be approximately 1 minute, but if we had a big headwind, for example, we might have to go out further, maybe a minute 15, something, but we'll kind of go through a process of determining exactly how long it takes us to come inbound as we go through this hold. Reaching approximately a minute, we're going to make a turn, and in this case for the parallel, the turn will be opposite the hold direction. It's just something you have to remember. we're doing right holds here, and so our turn will be to the inbound will be left. The parallel entry is the only entry where this happens. So we just have to remember the turn inbound on a parallel will be opposite the hold direction. So it's going to look like this. As we come to the end of our minute, we're going to make a turn. And we're going to need to intercept the inbound course. Now in this case, the needle, as it typically does on a parallel entry, will go all the way through. It'll go from right to left in this case. And we're going to have to pick up a heading with a full deflection on the needle of about 45 degrees. So we'll simply fly a 45-degree intercept to the 120 inbound radial. And when we are wings level, it'll kind of look like this. On the 45-degree intercept to the inbound, we will start our time. As the needle centers, we'll make our turn, and we'll make our turn to 120, intercept the inbound course, and now we're on the inbound. And our airplane will be coming in here. So it's going to look like that, and we can kind of visualize it on our HSI. Similarly, it'll look like this as we come inbound. So now we're inbound back to the VOR. We'll have a 2 indication. When we reach the VOR, since we're doing right holds here, we're going to again do our 5 T's. And by the way, the throttle and talk will be just throttle adjusted for the holding speed, whatever our holding speed needs to be. Typically it'll be 90 knots or maybe 100 knots in a little faster airplane. And we will also talk to ATC as required by the AIM, that we make a report to say that we're established in the hold. So we've now done our 5 T's. We're inbound. We're coming back to the VOR. What do we do next? Well, we'll see our flag here flip to a from. At that point, we know we've passed the VOR, and we will begin a right turn back to the outbound. Now here's the tricky part. Every hold, regardless of the type, turns into a direct hold the second time around. So now we've done the entry, we're now on the second time around. It's important to remember that we're going to enunciate our 5 T's, we're going to turn, we're going to twist. However, we've already twisted. We've already twisted to the inbound course of 120, so it's not necessary at this point. And we're going to think about starting our time. However, we don't want to start our time just in sequence as we say it, because we wouldn't want to start our time here. We need a full outbound in order to approximate a minute inbound. So we have to wait here until we have a 2 flip again. So at the point that we are abeam our fix, the ambiguity indicator again will flip back to a 2. And we remember our little mnemonic of timing the 2s. We're going to always time the 2 indications. So when that flag flips to a 2, we'll start our time and we'll begin our outbound again. And here we go to the outbound. And we'll have some experience at this point how long it took us to get to the fix the first time. And if we started our time here when we're wings level and it took us, say, a minute and 15 seconds, when we start our time here the second time around, we would adjust and maybe do a 45-second outbound so that, again, we're trying to get that 1 minute inbound. So really, that's pretty much it for doing a parallel entry and using our 5 T's. And next we're going to talk about the 2 other types of holds. Next we'll talk about the teardrop entry. Okay, so we're ready to start the second type of hold. Previously we did a parallel entry. Now we're going to talk about the teardrop entry. So what does that look like? Well, we start off really just the way we started off before. We got our airplane down here, and we've got our HSI or VOR up here. We're navigating towards the Julian VOR on an approximate heading of 055 and navigating directly to the fix with a centered needle on the HSI. Now that we have a centered needle, we're going to determine the hold entry by using our left hand, since the ATC instruction was for left turns. We'll again visualize on the HSI where the 360 hold radial lies, and we can see this time that the hold radial is in the 70-degree teardrop sector. Now, having determined the hold entry as teardrop, we have a little calculation to make unique to the teardrop entry. We have to make our outbound turn on a heading that is 30 degrees away from the hold radial. And as discussed in the ground lesson, the outbound heading on a teardrop is always in the direction towards the top of the HSI or VOR from the hold radial. So in this case, the hold radial is 360 and 30 degrees in the direction toward the top of the HSI will be 030.